If the one who hurt you most thinks you'll always be powerless, would you let them stay comfortable in that belief? Or would you let them watch as you quietly own the very place where they betrayed you? So let me ask you something that might make your head spin. If the one who humiliated you truly believed you could never fight back, would you quietly accept it? Or would you rewrite the rules and let them live in the shadow of your silent power? Camille Rivers always thought she was living the perfect life, or at least the life everyone wanted. The kind of life you saw in glossy magazines and Instagram stories. Smiling husband, chic apartment, sparkling social calendar. But the thing about perfection is, it can shatter with just one moment. That moment arrived for Camille on a rainy Thursday night in downtown Chicago, when a single decision, one she'd made out of love, unraveled her world. She hadn't planned to visit Marcus during his business trip. He'd left that morning in a hurry, kissing her forehead and promising he'd call before bed. Maybe it was the way he wouldn't meet her eyes or the tired excuse about last-minute meetings. Maybe it was just a woman's intuition. Either way, by 9 p.m., Camille found herself in a taxi headed for the Grand Marcella Hotel, gripping a bottle of his favorite Japanese whiskey. A silly, romantic gesture she hoped would bring them back together after weeks of drifting apart. The city was a blur of lights and rain as she watched out the window, her heart racing with hope and dread. She remembered their college days, sneaking cheap bottles into dorm rooms, promising they'd always be each other's forever. But marriage, she'd learned, wasn't a fairy tale. Not when you married a man like Marcus Rivers, rising star at one of Chicago's most ruthless private equity firms. He was brilliant, charming, and relentless in pursuit of success, and lately, more distant than ever. She entered the hotel through the revolving doors, feeling almost like an intruder. The Grand Marcella was a palace of marble and velvet, built for the city's elite. Its lobby bustled with business travelers, tourists, and women in designer dresses with perfect hair. Camille, in her rain-soaked trench coat, felt suddenly small and uncertain. But she forced herself toward the elevators, her heart pounding in her chest. Room 1803. She knew the number by heart. As the elevator climbed, Camille rehearsed what she'd say. "Surprise, I missed you. Maybe we can order room service, watch bad movies, just talk." She wanted things to be right again. She wanted her husband back. But the moment the doors opened on the 18th floor, everything changed. It was quiet. Too quiet. She walked down the thick, carpeted hallway, her footsteps barely making a sound. That's when she heard laughter. Two voices. One was Marcus's, deep and nervous. The other was unmistakably female, light, mocking, and completely at ease. Camille's stomach twisted. She stopped just outside the door. 1803. She pressed her ear against the wood, holding her breath. "You really think she suspects anything?" the woman's voice teased. "Marcus, please, she probably thinks you're working late again. Some people are just too easy." Camille felt her blood run cold. She heard Marcus mumble something. She couldn't make out the words. There was a pause, then a giggle, then the unmistakable sound of lips meeting. That was all it took. Her hand trembled as she slid the keycard into the lock. The green light flashed. She pushed open the door, and her entire life split down the middle. The suite smelled of expensive perfume and spilled whiskey. Clothes trailed across the floor, a man's dress shirt, a woman's heels. On the king-size bed, tangled in white sheets, were her husband and Alana Pierce. Camille didn't need to guess. She knew Alana. Everyone in Marcus's office did. The new VP of Business Development, 28, ruthless, with a body sculpted for attention and a smile as sharp as broken glass. She was the last person Camille ever wanted to see near her husband. Marcus scrambled up, panic in his eyes. "Camille? Wait, this isn't..." Alana barely bothered to cover herself. Instead, she looked Camille up and down, sizing her up like an annoying insect. "Oh, so you're the wife. You're even more plain than I pictured." She grinned, slipping off the bed with no shame. "Sorry, Marcus. Guess your little secret is out." Camille stood frozen, shock pinning her in place. "Get out, Alana." Marcus pleaded, but Alana just snorted. "Don't worry. She can't stop us, even if she tries." She leaned in, brushing past Camille with a smug smile, her voice low. "You really should have seen this coming. You're not in our league." The door slammed behind her, and for the first time Camille realized she was shaking. Marcus tried to grab her hand. "Camille, let me explain." She yanked away. "Don't touch me." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it shook with fury and pain. She stared at him, at the man she thought she knew. "How long?" she demanded. He hesitated. That told her everything. "How long?" she said again, louder this time, the words echoing off the hotel's marble and glass. "6 months," he muttered, looking away. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of her planning dinners, supporting his late nights, worrying he was burning out, when all along he'd been burning their marriage to the ground. "Camille, I'm sorry," Marcus said, but she barely heard him. Something cold and clear crystallized inside her. She realized at that moment that everything she had ever done to keep her marriage alive had been a waste. Her pride, her hope, her forgiveness, wasted on a man who'd never valued her. She looked around the room, the hotel suite, the crumpled sheets, the empty whiskey glass. Suddenly she understood. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something else. Something powerful. Something that would make them both wish they'd never underestimated her. She didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of Marcus. Not in front of anyone. She picked up her keys, squared her shoulders, and walked out, leaving her husband in the ruins of the life he'd destroyed. The storm outside had nothing on the storm brewing inside Camille. And somewhere, deep in her bones, a plan began to form. Long before the Grand Marcella scandal, Camille Rivers was an expert at being overlooked. It was a skill she'd honed from childhood, growing up as the quiet middle daughter in a busy suburban home in Evanston, Illinois, where her father was a high school math teacher, and her mother managed the chaos of 3 kids, 2 cats, and never enough time. Camille learned early how to make herself small so others could shine. She was the girl who shared her toys, let her siblings take the last slice, and always apologized, even when she wasn't at fault. School was much of the same. The dependable friend, the invisible honor roll student, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays but never had a party thrown for her own. It wasn't that people disliked Camille. Quite the opposite. Everyone liked her. She was nice, sweet, predictable. She blended into the background, a reliable shadow in a world that only celebrated the loudest and brightest. It was no surprise, then, that she gravitated to Marcus Rivers in college. He was magnetic, loud in every way. She was quiet, popular, ambitious, already talking about internships and IPOs, while most freshmen were figuring out laundry. Camille met him in a business ethics seminar, where she mostly listened and he always took center stage. What drew her in was his confidence. What made her stay was the way he looked at her, like she was the only one who saw him as more than just a future CEO. They started as friends. Late-night study sessions turned into early morning coffee runs. He teased her about her color-coded notes. She rolled her eyes at his reckless optimism. He'd say, "Camille, you're my good luck charm." And she believed him. She always wanted to be useful, wanted to matter to someone who mattered. When they started dating, it felt like being chosen, like finally someone had seen her. After graduation, while Marcus chased Wall Street dreams, Camille worked quietly in the city's nonprofit sector, raising money for literacy programs and soup kitchens. She loved her work, but it never came with recognition or fancy bonuses. Marcus, on the other hand, scaled the ranks of finance with the same ease he once dominated campus politics. Even then, Camille never minded the difference in paychecks or status. She liked being supportive. She believed that love was a partnership, a team. The years passed in a blur of office holiday parties and friends' weddings. Camille's role as Marcus's wife became a kind of shorthand at every event. She was the gracious hostess, the polite listener, the woman who handled RSVPs and thank you notes. She never challenged Marcus in public, never disagreed at dinner. If people whispered that she was too soft, too plain, or wondered what a man like Marcus saw in a woman like her, she tuned them out. She wore her kindness like armor. But underneath, cracks were forming. Marcus worked later and later. He started taking business trips Camille wasn't invited on. Then came the excuses about networking events and client dinners. She told herself it was the price of loving an ambitious man, that things would get better after his next promotion, after they finally started a family. After. What nobody knew was that Camille had dreams too. Secret ambitions she'd never dared say aloud. She loved old buildings, the ones with history in their bones and secrets in their walls. She'd taken night classes in architectural history, even got certified as a property manager, but told nobody except her best friend Lena. When she mentioned it to Marcus once, just once, on a rare Saturday morning when they actually shared breakfast, he barely looked up from his phone. "Babe, why waste your time on stuff like that? You don't need to work. Just let me take care of you." So Camille folded her dreams away, like the letters she wrote to herself as a kid, and hid under her mattress. She let Marcus's ambition fill the space where hers used to live. She was happy to play her part. Or so she thought. That night at the Grand Marcella, everything she'd accepted about her life twisted and cracked. The shock of betrayal gave way to a slow-burning rage, a feeling so alien she barely recognized it. How dare they? How dare Marcus take her for granted? How dare Alana Pierce look at her like she was invisible, like her pain was entertainment? How dare the world teach women like her that silence was virtue and self-sacrifice was love? For the first time in years, Camille allowed herself to feel the weight of her own story. She stood in the rain outside the hotel, not crying, not running, just breathing. She looked up at the glowing sign above the entrance, Grand Marcella, a symbol of luxury, power, and exclusivity, a place for people who mattered. Camille realized, with a clarity that almost frightened her, that she wanted to matter too, not just to Marcus, not just to anyone else, but to herself. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to do something bold, something nobody expected. She wasn't sure what it would be, not yet, but she felt a plan taking shape, a sense of purpose burning beneath her hurt. She pulled out her phone, hand steady now, and texted Lena, "Are you awake? I need to talk. I need to change my life." And for the first time in forever, Camille Rivers was done being overlooked. The Grand Marcella Hotel was not just a hotel. In Chicago's elite circles, it was an institution, a palace built for secrets, power deals, and the kind of luxury that thrived on being seen and being invisible at the same time. People said if you wanted to know who really ran the city, you just needed to sit in the Grand Marcella's gold-draped lobby for an hour and watch who came and went. Senators, CEOs, celebrities, every major scandal seemed to start or end in one of its marble hallways. For Camille Rivers, until now, it had always been a faraway place, something to admire from a distance. She had only been inside once before, years ago, when Marcus was awarded Young Professional of the Year at a glittering charity gala. Back then she wore a borrowed dress and a nervous smile, feeling both awed and out of place. The air in the ballroom had smelled of orchids and ambition. Women glided in silk and diamonds. Men laughed too loudly over glasses of $100 scotch. Marcus fit in seamlessly. His handshake was firm, his jokes always just edgy enough to make people remember his name. Camille, meanwhile, stood at the edge of every conversation, mostly forgotten except when someone needed to ask, "So what do you do, dear?" She had never forgotten that night. It was the first time she realized that Marcus's world was different from hers, a place where confidence was currency, and hesitation meant you'd get trampled. He thrived on it. She endured it. Now, standing in front of the Grand Marcella after her life had collapsed inside its walls, Camille felt both haunted and challenged by that memory. This hotel wasn't just the scene of her heartbreak. It was a symbol of everything she'd been told she couldn't have. Inside the lobby, the world was a flurry of opulence. Gleaming black and white marble floors stretched for acres, reflecting the sparkle of Art Deco chandeliers overhead. Uniformed staff glided soundlessly, anticipating every guest's whim before it was voiced. On one side, a trio of old-money socialites whispered behind gloved hands. On the other, a tech billionaire in sneakers argued with his PR manager, their voices barely audible above the gentle piano music. It was the kind of place where everyone had secrets, and where those secrets were carefully protected. For the right price. The staff knew how to look the other way. The cameras always seemed to miss the most interesting moments. Discretion was the Grand Marcella's most valuable amenity, and nobody paid for it more eagerly than people like Marcus Rivers. After the night of the scandal, word spread quickly through Marcus's circles. Alana Pierce had wasted no time telling her own version of the story at every rooftop party, every after-hours bar, every boardroom where she could make Camille look small and herself look irresistible. "She walked in on us," Alana would purr to anyone who'd listen. "You should have seen her face. Priceless. Honestly, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Marcus, meanwhile, became even more careful, shielding his reputation with excuses and half-truths. Camille's been struggling lately, he told colleagues with a look of practiced concern. She's always been sensitive, you know? The pressure got to her. Friends who had once come to their dinner parties suddenly found reasons not to call. Even Camille's own social circle began to shrink. People whispered, some with pity, some with glee. Camille could have retreated. It would have been easy, almost expected. Women in her position usually disappeared, licking their wounds in silence, hoping for a settlement or, worse, forgiveness. But Camille wasn't that woman anymore. She was tired of being powerless in a world that ran on connections, money, and appearances. She started coming to the Grand Marcella every day, at first just to walk the halls and remind herself of what she'd lost. She noticed things most people missed, the way the night manager always nodded to a certain guest, how the doorman remembered the names of regulars, the quiet confidence of the woman who ran the front desk. Camille watched, learned, and waited. One afternoon, she sat alone in the lobby cafe, a cup of overpriced chamomile tea cooling in front of her. She watched as Alana swept through the entrance in a designer dress, laughing loudly at something Marcus whispered in her ear. They looked like the perfect couple, the kind people envied and gossiped about. But Camille saw the truth. Marcus's strained smile, Alana's constant glance over her shoulder, the brittle edge beneath all that glamour. That was when Camille made a silent vow. She wouldn't just move on. She wouldn't let the Grand Marcella, this palace of secrets, be the end of her story. If this was where her marriage had ended, then it would also be where her new life began. She started asking questions, quietly and politely. She learned that the hotel's owner, an aging billionaire, was looking to sell. The staff had known for months, but the news was tightly controlled. Only a handful of brokers in the city were aware, and the price tag was so high that most interested buyers had walked away. Camille, however, had something those buyers didn't: motive. She didn't want the hotel for profit or prestige. She wanted it for justice, for closure, for the satisfaction of rewriting her own ending. She called Lena, her best friend, who happened to be a rising star at a private investment firm. Together, they began to research, strategize, and quietly assemble a plan that would take everything Camille had learned about being invisible and use it as a weapon. The Grand Marcella was about to become more than just the scene of Camille's greatest heartbreak. It was about to become the battleground for her transformation, a place where power, money, and vengeance would collide in a way nobody could predict. Especially not Marcus. Especially not Alana. If there was one thing Marcus Rivers loved more than success, it was being admired for it. He thrived on recognition. Every handshake, every headline, every sideways glance of envy from his peers. In his mind, life was a game, and he was always 2 moves ahead. Alana Pierce, with her sharp cheekbones and even sharper ambition, was a perfect match for his hunger. To outsiders, they were a power couple in the making. Young, bold, beautiful, and utterly ruthless. After the scandal at the Grand Marcella, neither of them showed an ounce of shame. In fact, they doubled down on their public image. Alana moved into Marcus's luxury apartment within a month. She posted filtered photos from rooftop brunches and gala fundraisers, tagging Marcus with clever captions like, "Building empires together, and power is the ultimate aphrodisiac." Marcus, for his part, reveled in the attention. He made sure to be seen at all the right places. The trendiest clubs, exclusive dinners, and of course, the lobby of the Grand Marcella. The hotel had become their unofficial playground, a place to celebrate their victory and parade their relationship for everyone, including Camille, to see. It was at one of the city's most important business galas that the humiliation became public. Camille had debated whether to go. She knew Alana and Marcus would be there, basking in the spotlight. But her friend Lena convinced her. Don't let them take up any more space in your life. This city is yours too. Show them you're not afraid. The night of the gala, Camille slipped into a classic black dress. Understated but elegant. Her nerves were raw, but she held her head high as she entered the ballroom. The Grand Marcella had pulled out all the stops: live jazz, towers of champagne, and waiters gliding past with trays of golden horse doves. All the city's movers and shakers were in attendance. It didn't take long for Camille to spot them. Marcus and Alana stood at the center of a glittering crowd. Alana's red dress was cut to command attention. Marcus's hand was possessively firm on her waist. When Camille entered the room, Alana was the first to notice. She didn't even try to hide her smirk. "Look who decided to show up," she whispered loudly enough for people nearby to hear. "Did you lose your invitation, Camille, or just your nerve?" A few in the crowd laughed. Marcus shot Camille a smug, dismissive look, a silent warning that she was the outsider now. Camille felt the sting, but refused to look away. She crossed the room with quiet dignity, accepting greetings from old acquaintances, pretending not to notice the whispers that followed her. Every word, every sideways glance, was another knife in her chest. At one point, Camille found herself standing beside Alana at the bar. The bartender poured champagne for both of them, setting their glasses down with a soft clink. Alana leaned over, her voice cold and sweet. "You know, Camille, there are two kinds of women in this world. The ones who make things happen, and the ones who watch from the sidelines. I'd hate to see you stuck in the cheap seats forever." Camille bit back her anger. "It's funny, Alana, you talk a lot about power for someone who's only ever borrowed it from other people." For a split second, Alana's smile faltered, but she recovered, tossing her hair and turning back to the crowd. Marcus, meanwhile, was working the room. He shook hands, made deals, and introduced Alana as his inspiration. The message was clear. Camille was the past. Alana was the future. It was cruel and intentional, a final act of erasure. The other guests played along, some with pity, some with open delight at the drama unfolding in real time. Later, during the gala's silent auction, Alana made her boldest move yet. She announced she'd be bidding on a luxury vacation package, the same one Camille and Marcus had won together 2 years before, back when they were still a couple. "Marcus and I love the Maldives," she gushed to the crowd, giving Camille a pointed look. "I hear it's best enjoyed with the right company." The entire ballroom erupted in laughter. Camille felt the humiliation rise up, hot and suffocating. This wasn't just about losing her marriage. It was about being shamed for believing in love, for trusting the wrong people, for daring to think she belonged in their world at all. She stepped outside onto the terrace, gulping the cold night air. For a moment she let herself cry, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was angry. Angry at Marcus, at Alana, at every person who saw her pain as entertainment. Angry at herself for being so easy to erase. That night, something inside her hardened. She realized she couldn't win by playing by their rules. She would have to invent her own. Camille stared up at the glowing hotel windows, each one a secret, each one a story. If Marcus and Alana wanted to rule this world, they'd have to do it on her terms. What they didn't know was that Camille had started the process of making a bid on the Grand Marcella itself. With Lena's help, she was quietly assembling a team of investors, lawyers, and advisors. She'd kept it secret, even from her family. It was risky, maybe even foolish, but for the first time since the betrayal, she felt a flicker of hope. If she could pull this off, she wouldn't just reclaim her dignity. She'd change the rules of the game forever. If the city's high society had a favorite pastime, it was gossip, and nothing fueled it like a public spectacle. That's exactly what Camille Rivers became after the Grand Marcella Gala. It wasn't enough for Marcus and Alana to win in private. Their next move was to turn Camille's pain into a performance, using every stage and social gathering as a way to prove her defeat. The cruelty was so casual, so well rehearsed, that no one could pretend it was accidental. It started at a charity luncheon hosted by one of Marcus's biggest clients, an event Camille had once organized herself. She hadn't planned to attend. She was still piecing herself together after the gala, but Lena insisted. "You deserve to be seen, Camille. You can't hide forever," her friend said, handing her a navy dress that fit like armor. Camille tried to keep her head up as she walked into the sunlit ballroom. The usual crowd was there, politicians, donors, corporate wives. She could feel their eyes on her, some pitying, some hungry for drama. Marcus and Alana arrived fashionably late, as always, making a show of greeting everyone with dazzling smiles. When they reached Camille's table, Alana paused, taking a long look at Camille's outfit. "Oh, you look comfortable," she said, lips curled in a mocking half-smile. I guess not everyone needs couture to feel special. A few guests stifled their laughter. Camille tried to ignore it, focusing on her salad and small talk. But Alana wasn't done. You know, she said, raising her voice just enough for the whole table to hear. Marcus and I were just saying how grateful we are for people like you. It's so important for the rest of us to remember where we came from. Some people never really leave behind their roots, do they? Marcus squeezed Alana's hand, grinning at the implied insult. Camille could feel her cheeks burning, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear, but she refused to give Alana the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she forced a polite smile and excused herself, heading for the powder room. The whispers followed her down the hallway like a shadow. Inside the bathroom, she locked herself in a stall and pressed her forehead against the cool metal door. The humiliation was suffocating. She could hear Alana's voice echoing in her mind. Every insult, every cruel giggle. Camille wondered if it would ever stop hurting, if there was any way to reclaim her dignity after being stripped bare in front of the people she once called friends. The truth was, Camille had always played by the rules. She was kind, honest, forgiving to a fault. She believed if she just did the right thing, the world would be fair. Now, all that goodness felt like a weakness, something Alana and Marcus could exploit for their own entertainment. After the luncheon, things got worse. Word of Camille's meltdown in the bathroom spread fast, exaggerated with every retelling. Some said she'd been sobbing, others claimed she'd thrown up. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the narrative. Camille Rivers, discarded wife, humiliated and alone. Marcus capitalized on it, telling anyone who asked that he'd tried to help, but Camille was too fragile for his new life. Alana added fuel to the fire, posting cryptic messages online about rising above haters and embracing new beginnings. Every like, every comment, was another twist of the knife. Camille retreated, limiting her outings to grocery runs and late-night walks. Even at home, the pain lingered. She couldn't eat. She barely slept. Her apartment felt too big and too empty, a monument to everything she'd lost. Friends called, but she let most of the calls go to voicemail. She didn't have the energy to pretend she was okay. One night, she sat alone in the dark, staring at the city lights outside her window. She let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since the hotel. It wasn't just sadness, it was grief for the woman she used to be, for the life she'd built and lost, for all the dreams she'd put on hold for Marcus's sake. But in the quiet aftermath of her sobs, something else stirred inside her. Anger. Not just at Marcus and Alana, but at herself for letting them dictate her worth. She remembered her mother's words, whispered years ago on a different bad night, "You can't control what people do to you, but you can control how you answer them. Don't let them turn you into someone you're not." Camille sat up, wiping her tears. She realized she was done waiting for permission to heal. She was done playing the victim in someone else's story. If Marcus and Alana wanted a spectacle, she would give them one they'd never forget. The very next day, Camille put on her best suit and marched into Lena's office. "I'm done hiding," she said, voice steady. "Let's finish what we started. I want the Grand Marcella. I want them to see what happens when the woman they threw away refuses to disappear." Lena smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "Welcome back, Camille. Let's make them regret ever underestimating you." The world thought Camille Rivers was broken, but she was about to show everyone, including herself, just how wrong they were. After the humiliation at the charity luncheon, Camille Rivers found herself drifting through the days like a ghost in her own life. She went through the motions, showering, making coffee, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, but none of it felt real. Her world had shrunk to the quiet confines of her apartment, the persistent ache in her chest, and the humiliating memory of laughter at her expense. Shame and self-doubt clung to her like a second skin. She avoided her reflection, afraid of the woman she'd see. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her eyes looked hollow, her smile forced. She wore sweatpants and t-shirts, not caring if her hair was brushed. The spark that once made her Marcus's lucky charm was long gone. Even Lena, her ever-optimistic, fiercely loyal best friend, couldn't reach her, no matter how many times she texted or called. Camille's phone was a graveyard of unread messages. Some nights, Camille lay awake staring at the ceiling, the city lights flickering on her walls. She thought about her parents, her childhood dreams, the version of herself she'd left behind for Marcus. She replayed every choice, every time she'd said yes when she wanted to say no, every apology she'd made just to keep the peace. She felt small and foolish. She wondered if maybe Marcus was right, if she really was too fragile, too soft for his world. The Grand Marcella, the very hotel that now haunted her, became a symbol of everything she'd lost. She avoided the block entirely, crossing the street if she even caught a glimpse of the awning. Memories of that night, the cruel words, the mocking laughter, the look of boredom on Marcus's face, played on an endless loop in her mind. The city, once so full of promise, now felt hostile. Even ordinary places, her favorite bakery, the bookstore on the corner, the park where she used to jog, seemed to echo with whispers and stares. She convinced herself that everyone knew, that the world had taken sides and she'd lost. But life didn't pause for heartbreak. Bills still needed paying. Camille's job at the literacy nonprofit was kind enough to give her time off, but after a few weeks she knew she had to go back. On her first morning back at work, she stood in the shower for a long time, letting the hot water run over her face as if it could wash away the pain. She pulled herself together, barely, and went through the motions at her desk, grateful for the distraction of spreadsheets and fundraising calls. Still, the sadness was overwhelming. She felt alone, even in a crowded office, untethered from the life she'd built. She would hear a joke and forget how to laugh. She would hear her coworkers gossiping and immediately think they were talking about her. She doubted everything: her talent, her intelligence, her ability to survive on her own. Lena, refusing to give up, finally showed up at her apartment with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Enough hiding, Camille," she said, plopping down on the couch. "You need to let it out, even if it's just with me." They sat together in silence for a while before Camille finally broke down. She cried for everything: for her broken marriage, for the friends she'd lost, for the future that would never happen. "It's like I'm watching my own life from underwater," she whispered. "Nothing feels real. I don't even know who I am anymore." Lena put an arm around her. "You're Camille Rivers. You are the woman who tutored half the neighborhood kids for free. You are the one who spent years supporting a man who never deserved you. You are the one who made this city feel like home for everyone but herself. But you know what? You can be more. You can build something that's yours. It doesn't have to be for anyone else." That night, for the first time in weeks, Camille allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't revolve around Marcus. A tiny, stubborn hope sparked inside her, the barest possibility that she could start over. But the next day, reality crept back in. The doubt, the fear, the little voice that said she wasn't enough. Every time she considered moving forward with the Grand Marcella plan, she heard Alana's voice in her head: "You can't stop us." Every time she considered calling the real estate broker, her hands shook. Was she really going to put herself back in the path of people who'd only ever laughed at her? She sat in her apartment, staring at the file of documents Lena had gathered. Property records, ownership details, a list of potential investors. It felt impossible. The numbers were dizzying. The risk was huge. Who was she to take on something like this? Camille's self-doubt was relentless, telling her to give up before she embarrassed herself further. But then, one sleepless night, she scrolled through her old texts with Marcus. She found a photo, one she'd taken of him at their favorite pizza place, long before the money, the cheating, the lies. He was laughing, looking right at her. She realized in that moment just how much she had changed for him, how much she had given up, and how little she had gotten in return. She deleted the photo. She scrolled through every last trace of Marcus and Alana and pressed delete again and again. It was just a small step, but it made her feel lighter, a little less haunted, a little more herself. The next morning, she called Lena. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but I'm tired of being scared. Let's do it. Let's buy the Grand Marcella. I don't know if I can pull it off, but I have to try." Lena cheered. "That's the Camille I know. Let's turn the world upside down." And for the first time in a long time, Camille almost believed she could. What nobody knew about Camille Rivers, not Marcus, not Alana, not even Lena, was that she wasn't as powerless as she seemed. For years, while her marriage faded in the shadow of Marcus's ambition, Camille had quietly prepared for a future that didn't depend on anyone else. She'd inherited a modest trust fund from her grandmother, money she never touched because Marcus always insisted he would take care of everything. She also had a rare gift for reading people, for remembering every name, every story, every whispered piece of gossip that others dismissed. After hitting rock bottom, Camille's quiet determination became a force. With Lena's encouragement and the smallest sliver of self-belief, she dug deep into her reserves, both emotional and financial. She didn't move recklessly. Instead, she became methodical, gathering information, listening in all the right places, and building her network in silence. The first step was learning everything about the Grand Marcella's real owner, Harold Mendel, a reclusive billionaire in his 80s. Rumor had it Harold was tired, ill, and desperate to sell, but only to the right buyer. He hated flashy investors who wanted to turn his beloved hotel into a soulless chain. He wanted someone who respected the building's history, someone who understood what the Grand Marcella meant to Chicago. Camille wrote a heartfelt letter to Harold, describing her lifelong love for the hotel, her background in community work, and her plans to preserve the Marcella's legacy. She included stories about how her own family used to walk by the hotel on Christmas Eve just to admire the lights and dream. "To you," she wrote, "this hotel is history. To me, it's hope. If you trust me, I promise to honor both." Lena leveraged her connections at her investment firm to find two discreet, values-driven partners: an aging philanthropist who loved local architecture, and a successful Black businesswoman who believed in giving back to her city. Together, they pieced together a private bid that was competitive, but not gaudy. They had just enough capital to buy the hotel, if Harold liked their proposal. While Lena handled the legal and financial work, Camille began her own kind of research. She took long walks around the Grand Marcella, talking to staff, asking about their favorite guests, their best memories, the traditions they cherished. She took notes, learned names, made small gestures of kindness: fresh coffee for the front desk manager, a generous tip for the housekeeper who confided that her daughter wanted to go to college. She wanted everyone to know she valued them, not just the building. Camille also began meeting with an old mentor, Mrs. Janine Archer, a retired attorney who had helped her during a difficult time in college. Mrs. Archer taught her everything about real estate deals, negotiations, and legal protections. "You don't win by being loud, Camille," she said. "You win by being smarter and by knowing exactly where your leverage lies." While all this was happening, Marcus and Alana were completely oblivious. They were too busy basking in their supposed triumph to notice anything out of place. Alana, always hungry for status, kept posting Instagram stories from hotel suites and designer boutiques. Marcus, growing bored with Alana's drama and eager for bigger deals, had started angling for a board seat at his firm. He barely noticed Camille's absence from society events. As far as he was concerned, she had faded away, just as he'd hoped. But not everyone had forgotten Camille. One afternoon, she received a call from Margaret Lynn, an influential socialite and the wife of Marcus's boss. Margaret had always liked Camille. She appreciated her quiet grace and remembered how Camille once helped her organize a charity event on no notice. Margaret invited Camille for tea, curious about her recent silence. Over delicate cups of oolong, Margaret said, "I've always admired you, Camille. Don't let people like Alana and Marcus erase your story. This city needs women who lift others up, not just those who tear them down." Margaret discreetly offered to introduce Camille to a friend who specialized in luxury property management, just in case she wanted advice. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a turning point. Word of Camille's interest in the Grand Marcella began to circulate in the most influential corners of Chicago's real estate world. Most people thought it was a rumor. Nobody could imagine the invisible wife having the guts or the resources to pull off a deal of that scale. Camille didn't correct them. She wanted to stay under the radar until everything was official. Meanwhile, Harold Mendel himself invited Camille to a private lunch in the hotel's library. He was thin and frail, but his mind was sharp. He asked her questions about her vision for the hotel, her values, her plans for the staff. Camille answered honestly, never overselling herself. "I know what it's like to be overlooked," she said. but I also know how much strength can come from having something worth fighting for. By the end of the meeting, Harold smiled and squeezed her hand. You remind me of my late wife, he said softly. She always believed in giving second chances, in finding beauty where others saw nothing. I think you're the right person for this hotel, Camille. Within days, Harold accepted Camille's offer. Lena called her, screaming with joy. You did it? We did it, Camille. You own the Grand Marcella. Camille's hands shook as she signed the final papers. She had done the impossible, not for revenge, but to prove to herself and the world that she could. But she also knew there was one final act left before her story was complete. Marcus and Alana still had no idea what was coming. They were about to discover that the woman they dismissed was never truly powerless. She just needed the right moment to reveal her strength. For most of her adult life, Camille Rivers had been a background character in her own story. But once the ink dried on the contract for the Grand Marcella, everything changed. The woman who had once apologized for taking up space was now in command of the city's most iconic hotel, and for the first time in years, in command of her own fate. Her transformation didn't happen overnight. The first step was a quiet one. She moved out of the apartment she had shared with Marcus, leaving behind all the memories and pain. She found a sunlit loft in the West Loop, filled it with fresh flowers, and unpacked boxes of books she hadn't opened in years. Camille spent hours just sitting by the window, relearning the shape of her own thoughts. For the first time, the silence was hers alone, and it felt good. She changed her wardrobe too, not to impress anyone, but to reflect the confidence she was rediscovering. Gone were the bland, forgettable dresses she'd worn to please Marcus. Instead, she chose clothes that made her feel bold. Sleek pantsuits, jewel-toned blouses, well-cut coats. She cut her hair into a sharp bob and swapped pale lipstick for a shade of red that made her feel unstoppable. She stood taller, walked with purpose, and met her own eyes in the mirror each morning with pride. The staff at the Grand Marcella felt the change too. Camille was a different kind of owner. Approachable but decisive, caring but clear-eyed about business. She spent her first week meeting with every department, from the kitchen staff to the cleaning crew to the front desk managers. She listened, took notes, and remembered names. When a beloved doorman's mother fell ill, Camille arranged for her to receive the best care. When a young maid confided that she dreamed of becoming a chef, Camille introduced her to the hotel's head of culinary operations. She also instituted new policies, higher wages, better benefits, and regular staff appreciation events. The energy in the building changed overnight. People smiled more, took pride in their work. Word spread quickly. This was no longer just a place for the rich to hide their secrets. It was a place where good people could build real futures. Camille didn't forget about the hotel's high society clientele either. She reimagined the hotel's events, bringing in artists and musicians from underserved communities. She hosted charity galas that actually raised money for local causes, not just for show. She started a mentorship program for young women who dreamed of working in hospitality, determined to help others find the opportunities she'd almost missed herself. But perhaps the biggest change was in Camille's mindset. She stopped shrinking herself to fit other people's expectations. She trusted her instincts, spoke her mind in board meetings, and refused to apologize for her success. When her investors questioned her ideas, she stood her ground and backed her vision with data and results. When a powerful developer tried to bully her into selling off the hotel's rooftop garden for condos, she turned him down flat and doubled down on her plans for a public park instead. Lena was there every step of the way, cheering her on. "I've never seen you like this," she told Camille over dinner one night. "You're not just surviving, you're thriving. You're dangerous." They laughed, but Camille knew it was true. The fear and doubt were still there, sometimes whispering late at night, but now she knew how to answer them. Meanwhile, in Marcus and Alana's world, nothing seemed to go right. Their relationship, once built on secrecy and adrenaline, was crumbling in the harsh light of reality. Marcus was under pressure at work. His bosses were unimpressed by the drama and gossip swirling around his personal life. Alana was frustrated by the fact that, despite all her maneuvering, she was still not being accepted into the city's true elite. She wanted more, and she blamed Marcus for not delivering. They barely noticed the changes happening at the Grand Marcella. To them, Camille had disappeared, just as they'd always hoped. Until, that is, the day invitations went out for the hotel's annual winter gala, the most coveted event of the season. This year, for the first time, the guest list was curated by the new owner. Nobody knew who it was. Rumors swirled about a European investor or a tech billionaire. Marcus and Alana, desperate to be seen, pulled every string they could to make sure their names were on the list. When the gilded invitations arrived at their apartment, Alana squealed with triumph. "This is it, Marcus. We're finally back on top. Everyone will see who we are now." The night of the gala, the Grand Marcella glittered with light and life. Paparazzi swarmed the entrance, hoping to catch a glimpse of the city's biggest power players. Inside, every detail was perfect. Flowers, music, food, the sense of anticipation that something special was about to happen. As guests arrived, whispers started. Who was the mysterious new owner? Where was the host? The anticipation built as midnight approached. And then, the ballroom doors opened. Camille stepped inside, radiant in a crimson gown, her head held high. The room fell silent. Some guests stared in disbelief. Others, remembering the gossip and cruelty of the past year, watched with quiet satisfaction. Camille smiled, greeting old acquaintances, gracious to supporters, coolly polite to those who had once looked down on her. Lena stood by her side, beaming with pride. For the first time, Camille was not just present, she was in control. When Marcus and Alana arrived, late as always, they saw Camille from across the room. Marcus's jaw dropped. Alana went pale. Camille met their eyes and didn't look away. She didn't have to say a word. Her presence was enough. By the end of the evening, everyone in Chicago knew the woman they'd overlooked had become the most powerful person in the room. And this was only the beginning. The Grand Marcella's annual winter gala had always been a stage for the city's elite, a place where alliances were forged, fortunes discussed, and status broadcast with every diamond and glass of champagne. But nobody was prepared for the show Camille Rivers was about to give them. The night would be talked about for years, not for its luxury, but for its seismic shift in power. Camille moved through the ballroom like she owned the place, because now she did. Old friends approached her, some sheepish, some awed. She greeted them with poise, never forgetting how quickly they'd turned their backs when her life fell apart. Lena stayed close, quietly ensuring that no one cornered Camille for gossip or apologies that were too little, too late. The rumor mill churned with theories about the new owner. People speculated in hushed voices, watching as Camille gracefully accepted congratulations for looking well and coming out the other side. Marcus and Alana, meanwhile, lurked on the periphery, clinging to each other for reassurance. As midnight neared, a hush swept the ballroom. The string quartet's music faded, and all eyes turned to the stage at the front of the room, where the hotel's managing director took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate a new era for the Grand Marcella. It is my pleasure to introduce our new owner, someone with a vision not just for this hotel, but for our entire city. Please welcome Camille Rivers." For a beat, the room was silent, then a ripple of shock and disbelief. Alana's jaw dropped. Marcus's face drained of color. The guests erupted into a stunned applause as Camille took the stage, standing taller than she ever had before. She smiled at the crowd, her voice clear and calm as she spoke. "When I first came to the Grand Marcella, I was a guest, just one face among many. I was welcomed with kindness, and I never forgot what it felt like to belong, even for a moment. But as many of you know, sometimes life tests us in ways we never expect." She let her gaze sweep the room, pausing just long enough to meet Marcus and Alana's eyes. "I was publicly humiliated here. I was laughed at, betrayed, and told, quite directly, that I didn't belong. But I want to thank every person who doubted me. Your disbelief gave me the strength to build something new, not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been told they weren't enough." The crowd murmured, some faces red with embarrassment, others beaming with admiration. Camille continued, "Tonight, I'm proud to announce new programs at the Grand Marcella. Mentorships for young women, scholarships for hospitality workers, and support for small businesses across Chicago. This hotel is no longer a playground for the privileged. It's a place for second chances, new beginnings, and real community. She gestured toward her staff, many of whom stood at the edge of the room, tears in their eyes. None of this would be possible without the people who work here. Their dedication, kindness, and hard work are the soul of this place. From now on, they will share in its success. The applause was thunderous, more real than any socialite's handshake or politician's compliment. Camille stepped down from the stage, and the crowd surged toward her, eager to offer congratulations. But as the party swirled on, Marcus and Alana could only watch as their moment in the spotlight slipped away. Refusing to accept defeat, Alana grabbed Marcus's hand and marched across the ballroom to confront Camille. The guests parted, sensing drama. Alana's voice was icy. "Congratulations, Camille. I suppose this is your revenge?" Camille didn't flinch. "It's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming what was mine and making sure nobody else is ever made to feel small here again." Marcus, trying to recover his composure, attempted a smile. "Camille, maybe we could." But Camille cut him off, her voice steady. "You had every chance, Marcus. You chose your path. I chose mine. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not here. Not anymore." The crowd watched, riveted, as Camille turned away, signaling to the staff to resume the celebration. Alana stood frozen, her confidence evaporating under the weight of the hotel's new reality. For the first time, she realized what real power looked like, and it wasn't the power to humiliate or exclude. It was the power to build, to forgive, to inspire. The press, hungry for a story, snapped photos of the confrontation. Headlines would soon announce Camille's triumph. "Scorned wife buys hotel, changes the game. Woman betrayed, turns tables on Chicago elite." But for Camille, the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the whispers. It was in the knowledge that she had remade her life on her own terms. As the night wore on, guests toasted Camille's success. The energy in the room had shifted. People felt lighter, freer, inspired by the idea that dignity could win out over cruelty. Old friends approached Camille, apologizing for their silence or offering to collaborate on her new initiatives. Some, clearly embarrassed by their own behavior, simply thanked her for the reminder that kindness was not weakness. Later, as the ballroom emptied, Camille found herself alone on the hotel's balcony, looking out at the city she now called her own. Lena joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "You did it," she whispered. Camille smiled, tears pricking her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief, pride, and the beginning of something new. "No," she said quietly, "we did it. For every woman who was told to sit down and stay quiet. For every dream that was almost forgotten." The Grand Marcella glowed behind them, a beacon for anyone daring to believe in themselves again. Camille had been written off, counted out, and humiliated in public. But she'd reclaimed her story, and now the whole world was listening. The city buzzed with talk of Camille Rivers' stunning transformation. Overnight, she became a symbol, a headline, a hashtag, a whispered legend at brunch tables and boardrooms alike. But as the press and social media tried to turn her into a myth, Camille stayed focused on what mattered most: her own life, her own happiness, and the ripple effect of her actions. The morning after the gala, Camille awoke in her sunlit loft feeling lighter than she had in years. The night replayed in flashes: the shock on Marcus's face, the silence as she took the stage, the thundering applause when she announced her new vision for the Grand Marcella. But what lingered most were the faces of the hotel staff, their tears and cheers, the sense that they too had won something precious: respect. For the first time in a long time, Camille allowed herself a slow morning. She brewed coffee, played her favorite Nina Simone record, and sat by the window to watch the city wake. She didn't scroll through the news or check social media. She simply breathed. The world could wait. For once, Camille Rivers came first in her own story. That afternoon, she returned to the Grand Marcella, not as a visitor, not as a guest, but as its owner. The staff welcomed her with warm smiles, and a few even hugged her. The once intimidating marble lobby now felt like a second home. Camille made her rounds, congratulating people, checking on new projects, and inviting the team to join her in the hotel garden for a toast. There, under the soft glow of fairy lights, Camille stood before her employees, her partners really, and spoke from her heart. "This is just the beginning," she told them. "We are building something that matters, something that lasts. This hotel will stand as proof that compassion and courage can change the world." The team cheered, and for a moment Camille allowed herself to feel every ounce of pride, every scar turned into strength. She'd been broken, yes, she'd been betrayed, laughed at, underestimated, but those wounds didn't define her. She had turned pain into purpose. She had found the courage to start over, not in spite of her scars, but because of them. The press clamored for interviews, but Camille was selective. She sat down with one reporter, a young woman named Sophia, who reminded her of herself years ago, bright-eyed and eager but nervous in a world that could be cruel. Sophia's first question was hesitant. "What would you say to women who feel powerless, who think they'll never recover from betrayal?" Camille smiled, steady and sure. "I would tell them you are stronger than you know. There's a power in hitting rock bottom, because once you're there, you see what you're really made of. Don't listen when someone says you're just a wife, or just a secretary, or just anything. Don't believe the people who measure your worth by your worst day. You get to decide when your story begins again." The interview went viral. People sent Camille thousands of messages. Women from every walk of life. Men who apologized for their silence. Old friends who found new respect. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about resilience, dignity, and the unstoppable force of a woman who refused to stay invisible. In the weeks that followed, Camille's life became a whirlwind of new opportunities. She launched the Grand Marcella Foundation, dedicated to helping women escape toxic relationships and find economic independence. She hired single mothers, survivors, and young women who'd been told their dreams were unrealistic. She gave scholarships, mentorships, and, most importantly, a sense of belonging to people who needed it most. Marcus and Alana faded into the background. They became a cautionary tale, a footnote in the story of Camille's rise. Occasionally, Camille would spot them at charity events or in the society pages, but she no longer felt anger or sadness, just gratitude that she'd escaped their small world. Sometimes, Marcus would try to catch her eye, but she always looked past him. She had moved on. Camille's relationship with Lena grew deeper. They traveled, laughed, and supported each other through every new adventure. Camille found herself open to love again, not the desperate kind she'd clung to with Marcus, but a quiet, honest love rooted in respect. She learned to trust herself, to listen to her own needs, and to never shrink to make someone else feel bigger. The story of Camille Rivers became a rallying cry. Women across the city and beyond held up signs, "Not invisible. Rewrite your story. Compassion is power." Camille was invited to speak at universities, conferences, and community centers. Each time, she ended her talk with the same words: "Don't wait for someone else to give you permission. Take up space. Make your voice heard. If someone tells you you can't stop us, let that be the spark. Not for revenge, but for your own revolution. Power is not something you wait for. It's something you claim, even if you have to build it brick by brick. And when you rise, lift others with you." 1 year after the night her life changed, Camille stood on the rooftop of the Grand Marcella, watching the lights of the city flicker. She thought of the girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, and the legacy she was building. She knew there would still be hard days. Life was never just a fairy tale. But now, every challenge was a chance to choose herself, and to prove that no one, no matter how cruel, could write her ending. As the sun rose, painting the sky with hope, Camille smiled. This was more than survival. This was her new beginning, a beginning that belonged only to her, and to every woman who ever dared to fight for herself. So the story has ended, and if you're still here with us, dear friends, I just want to take a second to talk directly to you. Because if you made it all the way through Camille's journey, then maybe, just maybe, something in her pain, her struggle, and her comeback touched your own heart in some way. Here's what this story really means for our lives. No matter how badly someone betrays you or how invisible you feel, your worth is never decided by others. Camille's transformation reminds us that even at our lowest, we still hold the power to rewrite our own story. Healing is not about vengeance or making others regret hurting us. It's about finding the courage to claim our place, build our own happiness, and lift up those who need it most. As the heterodox saying goes, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Let yourself heal. Embrace your scars. They're not the end, but a new beginning. If you feel something from Camille's journey, please hit like, share this video with a friend who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe and comment your thoughts below. Your story matters here. Let's keep building this community, where everyone gets to be seen, heard, and powerful in their own right.